Imagine a dark, cold dungeon in Florence. The year is 1513. A man is hanging from the ceiling by his wrists, his arms twisted behind his back, slowly dislocating from their sockets. This is the Strappado, a brutal form of torture designed to snap the body and the spirit. He endures this torment 6 times. When they finally let him down, his body is broken, his shoulders are ruined, and his life as a powerful diplomat is over. He is released from prison only to be exiled to a tiny, muddy farm, stripped of his wealth and his status. He is a man who has lost everything. But instead of fading away, Niccolò Machiavelli sits down at his desk and begins to write. He produces a short, sharp book that will forever change the course of human history. It is called The Prince, and it becomes the most feared and misunderstood manual on power ever written. For centuries, the world has viewed Machiavelli as an evil genius, a cold-blooded psychopath who taught tyrants how to lie, cheat, and murder to stay in power. The word Machiavellian is now a label for the most ruthless among us. But on Deconstructing Minds, we don't believe in simple labels. We perform psychological autopsies. What if the prince wasn't a blueprint for evil, but a desperate cry for survival? What if it was written not by a monster, but by a victim of extreme trauma, trying to make sense of a world that had betrayed him? Today, we are deconstructing the father of dark psychology. We are going to find the man who bled behind the cold words, and explore how torture and exile forged the most dangerous book in your library. Welcome to the deconstruction of Niccolò Machiavelli. To understand the Machiavelli of the Prince, we first have to meet the man he was before the dungeon. Niccolò Machiavelli was not a prince. He was a clerk, a civil servant. For 14 years, he was the heartbeat of the Florentine Republic. He was a diplomat, a strategist, and, above all, a patriot. He loved Florence with a passion that bordered on religious devotion. He spent his life defending the ideals of liberty, justice, and the rule of law. In his younger years, Machiavelli was almost an idealist. He believed that if a leader was virtuous and the people were loyal, the state would thrive. He traveled across Europe, meeting kings and popes, always fighting for his city's freedom. He even organized a citizen militia, arguing that a country should be defended by its own people, not by greedy mercenaries. But in 1512, his world collapsed. The powerful Medici family returned to Florence with a foreign army, and the Republic was crushed in a single day. Psychologically, this was total ego annihilation. Everything Machiavelli had worked for was erased. He was fired, accused of conspiracy, and thrown into the dark. Imagine the shock. One day you are an elite diplomat representing a great city. The next, you are a suspected criminal being hoisted into the air by your own dislocated arms. The idealist died in that dungeon. The man who walked out was a shell, haunted by what he had seen. His belief in virtue was broken. He realized that in a world of wolves, being a lamb is a death sentence. This profound disillusionment became the fuel for his writing. He didn't write about how the world should be. He wrote about how it actually was when the lights went out and the torture began. Following his release from prison, Machiavelli was banished to a small, impoverished farm in the hills outside Florence. For a man who had been at the center of European power, this was a living death. He spent his days in the dirt, catching birds for food, chopping wood, and arguing with local butchers over the price of a chicken. He was a man who had lost his identity. But every evening, when the sun went down, he engaged in a bizarre and heartbreaking psychological ritual. In a letter to a friend, Machiavelli described how he would return to his house, covered in mud and filth from the day's work. He would strip off his peasant clothes and wash himself, and then, alone in his quiet study, he would put on his magnificent formal ambassadorial robes, the silk and velvet garments he had worn when he stood before kings and popes. Dressed as a powerful diplomat, he would sit at his desk to write. This was more than just nostalgia. On Deconstructing Minds, we see this as a classic case of dissociation. Machiavelli couldn't accept the broken man he had become in the mud. So, every night, he resurrected the ghost of who he used to be. It was in these lonely, surreal hours that he wrote The Prince. He was a ghost attending a banquet of shadows, writing a book for a world that had already discarded him. The most shocking part of The Prince isn't the advice to lie or kill, it's the dedication on the first page. Machiavelli dedicated his book to Lorenzo de' Medici, the very man whose family had destroyed the Republic, ruined Machiavelli's life, and authorized his torture. Why would he do this? Most historians say it was a desperate job application. Machiavelli was unemployed, and his family was starving. He wanted to show the Medici that he was useful. But through a psychological lens, we see something much deeper. We see trauma bonding, a form of Stockholm syndrome. When a person is completely broken by an all-powerful force, the mind sometimes tries to survive by aligning itself with the abuser. Machiavelli was intellectually seducing his torturers. He was saying, "Look at my mind. Look at how much I understand the cruelty of your world. Let me back in, and I will show you how to be even more powerful." He wasn't an evil mastermind teaching tyrants how to rule. He was a traumatized survivor writing in his captor's language just to be heard. The Prince wasn't a manifesto for evil. It was the psychological tragedy of a man trying to buy back his life by offering the world a map of the abyss he had just been through. In his writing, Machiavelli tells us that a ruler must be two things, a lion and a fox. The lion to scare away the wolves, and the fox to recognize the traps. On Deconstructing Minds, we see this as more than just political advice. It was Machiavelli's emotional armor. After the dungeon, he realized that a man's goodness was his greatest weakness. To survive, he believed you had to split your soul in two. He was describing a state of hypervigilance. Because he had been betrayed and broken, he began to see the world as a permanent battlefield. He wasn't teaching rulers how to be evil. He was teaching them how to be invulnerable. He believed that if you can master the dark side of human nature, no one can ever hang you from a rope again. The Prince was a psychological shield, forged in the fire of his own trauma. It was the logic of a man who decided that since he couldn't change the cruelty of the world, he would become its most expert student. Niccolò Machiavelli died in 1527 at the age of 58. Despite his genius, he never got his job back. The Medici mostly ignored him. He died an unemployed, broken patriot, still dreaming of a Florence that would one day be free. But while the man died in obscurity, his name became immortal. Our autopsy reveals a chilling truth. Machiavelli wasn't born a monster. He was created by the monsters he fought. He showed us that morality is a luxury that many feel they cannot afford in a world of wolves. He gave humanity a mirror, a dark, honest mirror that doesn't show us who we want to be, but what we are capable of doing when we are pushed to the absolute limit. He was a defeated idealist who became an immortal symbol of the very power he could never reclaim. In the end, his life was the ultimate proof of his theory, that the world often punishes the virtuous and remembers the ruthless. Whose mind should we deconstruct next? Let us know in the comments. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous ideas are born from the deepest wounds.